I'm going out there for myself. But I get nowhere unless the team wins.
Team.
Most of us are familiar with the Untouchables story portrayed by De Niro as Capone, Costner as Ness. Box office numbers proved it was a success, but as a reflection of historic accuracy, it fell far short. Max Allan Collins is no stranger to the rules of Hollywood. He wrote the 2002 Chicago mob story Road to Perdition and is the author of the Dick Tracy comic strip. Why did it offend you so much, the inaccuracies of the Capone movie from '87?
What irritates me is the sloppiness of the way the history was portrayed. I'm fine with history being tweaked and compressed and so on, but you don't throw Frank Nitti off a building when you're Elliot Ness, who was a very straight shooter. And you certainly don't change juries in the middle of a trial.
To switch the juries.
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, I object.
The actual things that happened were of more interest and were often more bizarre.
Collins is an experienced writer. A. Brad Schwartz is a historian from Princeton. They sifted through newly released federal files where they found this: photos of the Untouchables. The authors talked to the relatives of the Untouchables and re-examined evidence. But let's start with the two men at the center of the story. Pop culture often embraces Scarface as just a fun-loving charitable bootlegger who ran soup kitchens for the poor.
The way the soup kitchen was maintained was by Capone sending his enforcers around to get free food from grocers. So the idea that this was out of his largesse is grossly exaggerated. I think what made Capone famous and infamous was a really savvy notion of how to do PR and a very basic notion of wanting to be liked. This is one of the things that just kind of jumped out at us.
In the early days, he may have indeed been viewed as just a fun-loving bootlegger, but then, February 14, 1929, the Valentine's Day Massacre as depicted in this 1967 film. 7 men connected to Chicago's North Side gang were gunned down in a garage on 2122 North Clark Street. Schwartz visited the brick wall from that garage, which was reassembled for the Mob Museum in Las Vegas.
You can still see the bullet marks. For many years it was in the men's room of a Roaring Twenties themed nightclub where the urinals were, but fortunately now it's in a protected museum environment. So I held the bullets that were taken out of the men in my hands, and I also went to the sheriff's department that confiscated the guns that we know were used in the crime, and I held them. And it's remarkable how that connects you to these sorts of events that have become legendary.
Schwartz visited the Department of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms to shoot one.
But when you're actually holding the gun that was used, or when you're actually seeing the wall, it takes you right back to that moment.
The Ness-Capone battle spawned innovations in crime fighting, like wiretapping. Northwestern and the University of Chicago were at the forefront of the city's virtual crime fighting lab. And while tax evasion is what brought Capone down, Ness's Untouchables set the stage for his downfall. A series of raids at breweries cut off funds for Capone when he needed them the most.
Ness and his Untouchables paraded all of the trucks that they had confiscated, the beer trucks from Al Capone, past Capone's headquarters in the Lexington Hotel. And Ness, in one of the only times they ever had direct contact, calls Capone up and says, "Look out your window at 11 a.m. and you'll see something interesting." And then Capone flies off the handle as he was prone to do and threatens to have Ness killed. I was sure, I would have guaranteed you that that was fictitious, because people had denied that it could have happened, that Ness was not having anything to do with Al Capone. So why would that be true? But we were able to find numerous sources. All of the remarkable things, the wiretaps, the parade of trucks, the almost getting knifed when he was undercover in a saloon in Chicago Heights. It all happened.
What's the matter? You afraid to come out from behind your men? You afraid to stand up for yourself?
They met frequently in fiction, but historians doubted they ever met in real life. This photo proves them wrong.
Ness escorted Capone to Dearborn Station and put him on the train to send him to prison in Atlanta. This notion that they never met, which some historians have put out there, that's false.
It seemed to me that Capone had really bad legal advice and legal representation.
Capone had almost suspiciously bad legal advice. There's really good evidence that the federal people basically, shall we say, colluded with people in the mob to put Capone away and make it seem like crime was no longer a problem in Chicago.
Weren't they concerned that somebody would just fill that void and replace him?
Yes, someone would obviously fill that void, but that someone would not be wearing a pearl hat, smoking a cigar, with scars on his face, and throwing the first ball out at the baseball game. They wanted that kind of PR off. They wanted a different face on the city of Chicago. Both the government and also the outfit itself, who preferred to do their business in a more quiet way.
Ness and Capone, opposite sides of the law, but both revolutionized their respective professions.
The fact that this is a fundamentally American story, that's a fundamentally Chicago story, that even though so many of the buildings are gone, the St. Valentine's Day Massacre garage has been torn down, the Lexington Hotel, even though the physical reminders in many cases are gone, Capone and Ness are still baked into the architecture of this city.